We'll have 5-minute questions, and we'll have a lot more turnout when as they come back in from other committees. For a number of years, we viewed the development and deployment of a layered ballistic missile system as a defensive shield, as vital to our national security and that of our allies. We currently have 44 ground-based interceptors. That dropped down for a while to 33 and back to 44 now. In California, in Alaska, and recently approved supplemental appropriations for adding 20 more to the total inventory. We have other missile defense systems such as Aegis and THAAD to help track and destroy missiles in the terminal phase. Senator Sullivan and several of us have kind of looked at the three phases and come to the conclusion that the boost phase would be probably the area that if we could get that perfected would cause them to be the most vulnerable. And I think that we're kind of behind in that, and I'd like to kind of explore that. Admiral Blair, you're more closely associated with these options that we have out there. What do you think about all three phases and then concentrating on improving the boost phase?
I agree completely, Senator Inhofe, that boost phase is the best point at which to shoot down missiles because they haven't had a chance to deploy all sorts of deceptive devices and different warheads and so on. As you know, that's something that's been known to for a while. We've been working on it.
Well, you see, that's
North Korea is what's called a thin country, so it cannot place its missiles so far back that it can keep them out of boost phase intercept range. So I think that's a very important phase, and I agree with you completely. We should be pursuing it.
I look at people like you who have been involved in this for a long period of time. What's the reason that we have not jumped into the obvious phase that we could be most effective in?
I think I would cite three things, Senator. Number one, we'd put a lot of effort into the airborne laser, which we thought would be exactly able to do that. And it turns out the science was fine. The engineering was a lot harder than we thought, and eventually terminated the program. The only other two ways to get close enough to do a boost phase interceptor with a ship off the coast or on Republic of Korea territory, ROK has not until recently been willing to do the sort of cooperation that would host that, and to keep a U.S. ship on station in the North Korea 24/7, 365 has been a heavier burden than the other commitments of those ships have been willing to bear. So I think those are all things that should be revisited, and I agree with your emphasis.
Yeah. Any other comments on that from the other two witnesses?
I would, if I may add to Admiral Blair's comments, I agree with him. In addition to boost phase, we have one battery of THAAD in Korea, somewhat politically controversial. I suspect we'll need more. The Japanese are looking at Aegis ashore. Remember, we have bases there. We should support that. And perhaps more interceptors at Fort Greely, Alaska. But the other thing I would add is that the architecture of missile defense is going to be critically important. China's opposition to the THAAD deployment, I believe, was more about preventing a Korea, U.S., Japan, potentially Australia architecture of missile defense. Frankly, that's exactly what we need to have more effective defenses. It also is a source of leverage for us because if China doesn't want to see our alliances become more integrated and joint through missile defense, then China's going to have to put more pressure on North Korea. In other words, the more serious we are about missile defense with our allies, the more effective we'll be at defending ourselves, but also the more effective we'll be diplomatically at putting pressure on Beijing to in turn put pressure on North Korea.
I would agree with Dr. Green's comments. I would add one thing. In addition to the importance of missile defense capability is the importance of actually being able to practice it alongside our allies. Yeah. And so really important is the trilateral defense cooperation that is ongoing in this regard, but certainly needs to be deepened.
Yeah, I think most of the things that have been mentioned, certainly by you, Dr. Green, we did address in the NDAA, and we are aware that we've fallen behind there. I want to make one last comment about, and this was 25 years ago, during the Senate confirmation, CIA Director James Woolsey, who happens to be an Oklahoman, I've known him for quite some period of time, he said, We have slain the large dragon. He's referring to the Soviet Union. But we live now with a jungle of a bewildering variety of poisonous snakes. Of course, he's talking about, at that time, 25 years ago, that one poisonous snake that we're talking about this morning. And I think that's the most vexing of those poisonous snakes. Now, despite the fact that Russia and China represent the greatest threats in military supremacy, we understand that. But the word imminent, which I used in my opening statement, is a word that is used describing North Korea by every witness that we've had so far appearing before this committee. And so I would just ask the three of you, do you agree in term it as the most imminent threat? That should be North Korea. Or do you want to stand out as the only three who don't agree with that?
No, I don't agree with that. I mean, it's only an imminent threat if we make it an imminent threat. We've been talking these guys up a lot more than they deserve. As I said, this is a long-term movie, not a YouTube video or not a snapshot. A steady, sustained, powerful American policy can keep North Korea under control where we have and where it belongs. So I would not turn it into more of a crisis than it is.
Yeah, I noticed you said at the conclusion of your opening remarks, I asked them to find it so I could read it in its whole context. And it wasn't in your written statement when you said you're mystified by the doom and gloom surrounding our policy on North Korea. I guess that kind of fits in with you deviate a little bit from others' opinion.
Yes, sir. I think we can handle these guys, and we only talk ourselves into being at a disadvantage by our own rhetoric. Every time the United States is firm and strong, North Korea backs down and waits for another day. It happened in, say, '76 with the infamous cherry chopping incident. It happened in '94 with the agreed framework when President Bush talked about the axis of evil and then invaded Iraq. This guy's father went to ground for several months. You know, what was it Grant said? Yeah. My job is to make the other person worry about what I'm going to do, not to worry about what he's going to do. And we've got the high card. So
in spite of the fact that at the time, the previous examples that you're using were, at that time, North Korea did not have the degree of successes they've had most recently, particularly on November 28th.
In '94, they did have nuclear weapons. They could deliver them by many unconventional means, and the North Koreans are specialists at unconventional means. The ICBM, as I said, if you want to test an ICBM fully, you have to be there where it lands, as well as being there where it takes off. You have to take measurements and understand that all of the mechanisms for deploying the weapon work. North Korean will never be able to do that, so they're always going to have an uncertain.
All right, very, very good.